Welcome everybody. It's Chocolaty's 11th birthday today. 11 years ago, Rob Reynolds committed the first code to what would become Chocolaty CLI. And today we're celebrating the 11th year. And I've got today Gary joining me, Gary Park, and we'll have some of the Chocolaty team later on to help you or help us celebrate with you this great event. We've also got a milestone in Chocolaty history. I won't talk about that just now. I've got a few slides to share. I want to go over some history of what's occurred in Chocolaty in the last 11 years, some milestones, some things that we want to celebrate today and rightly blow our own trumpet about, shout about, tell the world about what we've been doing at Chocolaty. So before I start the slides, I want to just introduce myself. My name is Paul Broadwith. I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolaty Software. And I also want to introduce Gary. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself just before we start the slides?
Sure, yeah. My name's Gary Park. I'm a Senior Software Engineer here at Chocolaty. Yeah, and excited to share some of the stuff that we've got to tell you all about today.
Awesome. Okay, I'll go ahead and I will share my screen with some slides. Hopefully we can all see that all right. So our slides today, this awesome slide, this awesome image was put together by our wonderful front end developer, that's Stephanie. And we've put this today onto our Twitter, onto LinkedIn, onto Facebook, onto Reddit, all of our social media places that we're available in. We've also added the little icon you can see in the middle there, the chocolate cake with the 11 on it. We've added that avatar to Discord and various other places as well. So I'm just going to go through, as I said, a few quick slides, and then we'll talk about what we're actually releasing today, the milestone releases that we've made. So this is a timeline of what's happened in the Chocolaty world since it was born all that way back in March 2011. So you can see the left-hand side there. Our first code was committed to Chocolaty way back on 21st of March 2011 by our founder, Rob Reynolds. And you can see that lovely Chocolaty logo that's there. And I wanted to put that on there so we can show you how we've progressed to the logo being changed in 2016. But just after March, the first code was committed, the Chocolaty package repository was born. Now it wasn't born in the same way as it exists today, but it was similar enough where people could download packages with Chocolaty and install and upgrade those. It looked a little different back then. Then we moved on to the 7th of September 2011. Now, it wasn't called Chocolaty GUI all the way back then. It was called the GUI for Chocolaty, and that was born out of a side project by Christian Bays. I hope I'm pronouncing the name properly. But and then Gary later on became the maintainer of that. But along that way, there was a lot of help from the community as well. Forwarding on to 2013, the Chocolaty repository exceeds 1 million downloads, and that's just over 2 years since it was born. And there was over 1 million downloads of Chocolaty packages, not the Chocolaty package, but all of the Chocolaty packages that were on there. And then not even a year later, we had 1 million downloads, or exceeding 1 million downloads in July 2014. So we come a long way from just the repository, the downloading of those 1 million packages. So the Chocolaty package itself exceeding that 1 million downloads as well. Over to October 2014, one of the big changes to the community repository was the moderation of packages. So prior to that, anybody could submit a package and that would have been approved. But as of October 2014, it was Thomas Walter that was actually looking after that. During the period of 2015, he was looking after the moderation, while other members of the team and community members were actually working on additional parts to the framework. But that was a huge milestone for us. And you can actually see, if you look at some of the older packages, you'll see the ones submitted before 2014. There's actually a little message in the package pages saying this was submitted prior to moderation. If you've ever wondered what that meant, this is what it means. So forwarding on a little bit more, March 2015, This might be a surprise to a lot of people, but the first release of C# Chocolatey was made. Now, a lot of people don't know that Chocolatey, when it was the first code was committed way back in 2011, was actually written in PowerShell. But Rob, I went and rewrote Chocolatey in C#, and that was the first release of Chocolatey in March 2015. And then forwarding on, December 2015. So we've got the moderation of packages in 2014. That was the manual moderation, someone going through that queue, looking at packages and making sure that they were good to be approved. But in December 2015, just over a year after that was done, package moderation services were introduced. And if from memory, it was the validator, the verifier, and I think it was the cacher that was introduced at that point. And what that did was that made packages go through the queue a lot faster than they previously was possible. So Thomas, who was, as I said, was looking after that June 2015, would have had a much easier time going through the packages at that point. And then another important milestone, that Chocolatey logo, the new Chocolatey logo was introduced in April 2016 from a community member who actually designed that logo for us. And then Chocolaty Fest. That was a huge milestone in Chocolatey as well. I attended Chocolaty Fest back in 2018. Myself, Gary, and Stephanie had attended Chocolaty Fest back then, along with Rob. It was a fantastic event. It was the first event that Chocolatey had ever done. And it's something we want to maybe look at doing again in the future. But if any of you were there, you'd have got that, potentially got that awesome t-shirt as well with the golden ticket on there. And rate limiting as well. October 2019, if any of you have encountered rate limiting, the reason that was introduced was to make sure that the community repository was for the many and not the few. What actually going on was that the site was under load because it was being used primarily by a lot of organizations to download packages. So rate limiting was introduced to try and make sure that that load on the server was balanced with the needs, so that the needs of the many as against to the few. And that was a huge milestone as well, introducing that, and it's kept the repository stable ever since. And finally, another huge milestone in Chocolatey history, 1 billion package downloads in May 2020. We can't underestimate how huge that was. So we've come from 1 million back in 2013, 7 years later, we're at 1 billion package downloads. So there's that timeline that we had a look at there. We've put together a timeline of Chocolatey software history, and we can go. You can have a look at that today. If you go to the URL on the screen there, you'll be able to have a look at the timeline that we've created of all the product releases, all the major product releases, and all of the milestones that you saw in this slide here. So this is just a small selection of what has occurred over the history of Chocolatey, but you can see it all in this timeline. So please visit that. Let us know if there's anything that should be added. Let us know if there's anything missing. But we find that a fairly comprehensive history, and we hope that's a real interest to you. So what I want to talk about here is some of the downloads. So we talked about in the slides, we talked about 1 million package downloads. We talked about 1 million Chocolatey package downloads, and we talked about 1 billion package downloads in May 2020. So what I want to talk about here is the escalation of those downloads year on year. And you could also see why rate limiting was introduced. I've got that as a blue line on the screen there. And one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning is if you're wondering why these colors are the way they are, because these aren't the usual colors we use at Chocolatey when we do presentations or slides. I wanted to keep with that birthday theme. So you can see the balloons behind me. Those colors kind of represent those balloons. But going all the way back to 2013, there was 1.6 million downloads at the end of that year. And then we've just gone through, it's 9 million, then it goes up to 36, 80. You can see the increase there is just its exponential growth almost. And then in between 2018 and 2019, there's 180 million packages of an increase there. And that's a huge amount of package downloads between those 2 years. And we introduced rate limiting, as I said, for reasons that those 180 million packages, you can imagine the kind of load that the community repository would have been under. And again, as we said, community repository is for the community, for the many, not the few. And that rate limiting was introduced to make sure it was available for the many. And you can see from there that the package downloads have actually decreased from those years on. It's 18 million between 2019 and 2020, and going up to 24-ish million between 2020 and 2021. So we can see that that rate limiting had the desired effect. And we look at, there's a lot of organizations that would have used the repository and are now using internalized versions of packages in an internal repository as well. So it really had the right effect there. And this is one that I wanted to look at myself. I wanted to understand where we were in terms of what packages, product releases we had released out into the wild. If you look at the beginning there, you can see that it's quite high in 2011. There was that flurry of activity before, while the Chocolatey was going out and was being stabilized and the features were being added. And then it kind of slows down a little bit as we look at introducing a bit more stability to it. We've got there as well 2016 and 2015, 2016, you've got the packages increasing again as we release different products into the mix. So 2015 saw the Chocolatey licensed extension and then Chocolaty Agent in 2017. So you can see the reasons why those packages jumped up. And then we kind of dropped down again 2018, 2019. But in 2020, we saw Central Management, Chocolatey Central Management was born. And also Box Starter came under the Chocolatey organization. Matt Rock passed Box Starter over to Chocolatey. And in 2021, we saw the new Chocolatey for Business Azure environment being introduced as well. And as you can see, we're just jumping on to this year, there's been 15 product releases this year already. So in the whole of 2021, there was 30. And in the first quarter of 2022, we've already reached half of that. And we're hoping that we'll actually break that 30. But that's not the goal. The goal isn't to get as many releases out there as possible. The goal is to get stable software that everyone can use out there into the wild. So the big milestone that we've hit today, if you've been using Chocolatey for any length of time, you'll know that, for example, we had the 0.12.1 was the last version, and prior to that 0.12, 11, 0.10, and all the way back. So there were always the 0 versions. There were always those minor version releases in terms of version numbering. But today we're actually releasing version 1 of a lot of products. So 11 years ago, Chocolatey was born, as I said at the beginning, and 11 years later, we're actually releasing milestone versions of Chocolatey CLI. It's version 1 today. Chocolatey licensed extension is version 4. Chocolatey GUI licensed extension, and Chocolaty Agent are all version 1 releases as well today. And as a celebration and a little thank you to our community, all IT people, we all love badges, and we've added birthday Discord badges for everybody who was a member of our Discord as of this morning. We've added them into the group that gets the birthday Discord badge. So you'll see that in your profile. And also anybody who had a Chocolatey profile as of today as well has also been given an additional badge, and you'll be able to see that under your profile itself. So while, a version release is a version release, this is a massive milestone for Chocolatey. 11 years, and we're now at version 1 of the CLI GUI licensed extension and agent, and also that version 4 of Chocolatey licensed extension. It's a massive, massive leap forward for us. And we want to draw a line in the sand where version 1 is our stable version. And we've got plans for future as well that we can talk about at some other point. So yeah, this one goes to 11. It's our 11th birthday. I was going to get a little streamer to blow and not make a noise, but yeah, that's not a great idea on a stream. It will probably pop someone's ears. So what we want to do is we want to look at those versions, and we want to look at the release notes, and Gary's actually going to come in and talk with us about that.
Hey. Yep, so I can do that. So I can, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And just before we get started on any of the release notes, I had it open because I wanted to check it out if I've got it. So on the profile badge on the community website, I can now say I've got a community badge. And down at the bottom here, I've got my Chocolatey 11th birthday member community badge. So yeah, I do like badges, Paul. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. I
was going to say as well, Gary, actually, if you scroll to the top of that page, something I didn't release is we actually released a blog post today all about it. And that's announced at the top of the page.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to read that, kind of a summary of what Paul's discussed there, it's in the blog post. So definitely check that out. So that was that. So where do we start? So we have released major versions of the 5 core Chocolatey components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the other end. So I'm not going to start with Chocolatey. We're going to come back to what's went into the Chocolatey release. We're going to start with the Chocolatey GUI license extension. Because simply put, there wasn't much additions made to the Chocolatey GUI license extension. But what we have done within this set of releases is to set a baseline. So we've made all of the core packages depend on those major versions of Chocolatey and the Chocolatey license extension. Paul kind of touched on it, but the reason we want to do that and the reason we need to do that is that there are things that we want to build onto our products, and some things are going to change, some things are going to break. So setting that baseline of that major product version just makes sense across the board in terms of setting that baseline of what the functionality is and what you can expect within Chocolatey going forward. So there is a mention of breaking changes to the Chocolatey GUI license extension, but in essence, what that is the Chocolatey GUI license extension now takes a direct dependency on both the 1.0.0 version of Chocolatey GUI, and then we've added a dependency on the Chocolatey license extension. That wasn't there before, so again, that's why it's a breaking change, but that is just to ensure a seamless upgrade experience. So when you do Choco upgrade Chocolatey GUI license, Chocolatey GUI.extension, it will pull in all the required dependencies in that operation and make sure that it all gets installed in the right order. So it's important there. The important thing there, and we'll reiterate this a couple of times, is that if you are using Chocolatey for Business and you start at the front end, if you like, and you do a Choco upgrade Chocolatey, things will break because there is a dependency issue there. So what Chocolatey can do, Chocolatey as a product can ensure dependencies downstream. So if I do Choco upgrade Chocolatey GUI extension, then it's going to install all the dependencies that are required to make that version work. But if I start at the other end and I do Choco upgrade Chocolatey without doing the other packages, then there are going to be breakages there. That's something that we want to look into going forward. But again, we want to get to that baseline. So we're at that baseline now, and then we can start thinking about what we need to do to improve that experience so that breakage doesn't happen when you do an out of order upgrade of the components. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, feel free to reach out and we can discuss that more. We did in our previous release blog post mention why that dependency or what that dependency matrix is. We should probably update that with the new versions that are now in play as well. So that's it. That was the release notes for the Chocolatey GUI license extension. So go ahead and close that one off. Next one I wanted to talk about was Chocolatey GUI itself. Now, there is the same breaking change in this. So in the same way that Chocolatey GUI extension had a dependency bump, Chocolatey GUI itself does now as well. So the breaking change there, again, there's a dependency change, so we treat that as a breaking change. But there was a small bug fix that I wanted to point out as well that we brought in this release, and it was from a community member. It was Jan that found this. So if I just open up Chocolatey GUI here, when you were using the feature to change sources from a keyboard shortcut, so right here, so I'm on this PC source within Chocolatey GUI, but if I do Control and then 2, then obviously that's not working because of reasons, but let's just check to see if that feature is enabled. Keyboard bindings is off, so that's why it's not working. I'm going to turn the keyboard bindings feature on, and I'm going to go back. That must have been from a previous run of the demo. If I do Control 2 now, it's going to change the selected source to be, in this case, the Chocolatey community repository for me. So again, if I do Control 1, it will switch back to this PC source. So a really nice feature for keyboard binding. But if you enable another feature within Chocolatey GUI, which is to provide an aggregated source, which is show aggregated source. Now, the concept of an aggregated source is it's going to show a single all sources, which is co-mingling all the packages from the community repository and the Chocolaty license feed into a single source. So you can see all the packages that are available rather than going through each one individually. Now, if you were to use keyboard bindings in this state and you were to do Control-3, it would actually try and select the separator that's in there, and that you would get an error displayed on the Chocolaty GUI page. So Jan quite quickly came up with a solution for that. So thanks to Jan for that. And now when you Control-3, it correctly goes to the right source rather than trying to show a non-existent source in terms of the separator. So that's what that was. And the other one, there was a small issue with my typing. So I'll put my hand up to that. If I do an export here and I say, let's do ctemp, I'm going to create a packages.config where I'm exporting all of the currently installed packages. I actually had a folder called packages. If I save all of my currently installed packages from Chocolaty GUI, the window that popped up had 3 R's. I was rolling my R too much as a Scottish person, and I had 3 R's in the word currently, and that's now been fixed. So thanks to, it was a community contribution as well that made that fix that one. So 2 small things that went into Chocolaty GUI in this release. The big thing being, obviously, again, that the dependencies have changed. We're now depending directly on the released major version of Chocolaty. So we've rolled up Chocolaty GUI to a 1.0 release as well. So hopefully all that makes sense. So with that one done, let's look at Chocolaty Agent. It's much the same story for Chocolaty Agent. The story so far has been, we haven't added any core functionality into the product, but because we've bumped that baseline version to 1.0 of Chocolaty CLI and to 4.0 of Chocolaty extension, we've rolled up the dependencies again into Chocolaty Agent. So if you were to do a Choco upgrade Chocolaty Agent, it will then install that dependency tree again to make sure that everything's installed as required. We have got lots of plans for what we want to put into Chocolaty Agent, but there wasn't any new features or functionality went into this release. So that's Chocolaty Agent. The one after that, we're starting to get into where things have changed, and we need to start being clear about what's happened. So I'm not watching the chat if there are any questions, but I'm sure Paul will interject if there are any questions. So feel free to do that, Paul.
There is one in the chat just now, just before you move on, actually.
Yeah, go for it.
Somebody's asked if we hide the individual, this is in Chocolaty GUI, if we hide the individual sources and just leave the aggregate shown, or can we hide the individual sources and just leave the aggregate shown?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm willing to try it. So there is a feature.
This is live.
We're going off on a tangent here, but the Chocolaty GUI license extension does have a couple of features that can either put you into one of 2 modes. One, which is kind of referred to as a read-only mode, where you can only see the local source, so you can't see any remote sources at all. All you can see is what's installed on your machine via Chocolaty. The other way is to only show remote sources. So there are 2 features that you can toggle. I'm kind of scared to do it, but so there's one that is hide all remote Chocolaty sources, or there's the hide this PC source. Those 2 are essentially mutually exclusive. You can't have them both on at the same time, otherwise you'd have no packages displayed. So the question was, can you show the aggregated source but not show the actual sources? So that would be hide all Chocolaty sources. Now that setting, because of reasons, doesn't take effect straight away. You would have to close Chocolaty GUI and then reopen it. So either this is going to work, or we're going to have a bug that I need to go and fix, and we'll have to do a 1.01 release of Chocolaty GUI. Okay, so it did what I think is essentially the right thing there. So in that scenario, it doesn't have any sources, so the aggregate source isn't shown. So the answer to the question is no, you can't do that. Whether that makes sense, that's maybe a feature request to put in. So whoever asked the question, potentially that's a feature request that could go into, likely into the Chocolaty GUI license extension. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so now we're at Chocolaty Extension itself. So unlike all the other 4 core components, Chocolaty Extension went to a 4.0, a major release of 4.0 rather than 1.0. Simply put, Chocolaty Extension's been around for a while. It's gone through multiple iterations, and there's been breaking changes in there. So we've had to bump that major version as we went down that path. So as we come to this point in our Chocolaty history, where everything's at a 1.0 release, we've went to a 4.0 release of the Chocolaty license extension. It can be a little bit confusing. Even putting the slides together this morning, myself and Paul, we got the version numbers wrong on our slides and we had to fix them because we had everything as 1.0. But I mean, what I think we will be doing is we will be putting a matrix of version numbers and what things work with which on the website, just so there's some clarity around exactly where that baseline is. But at the minute, so the 4.0 release of Chocolaty Extension. Now the breaking changes, the first one is pretty much the same as the other products that we've already discussed. So Chocolaty Extension now takes a direct dependency on Chocolaty CLI and the Chocolaty lib package, which is the kind of core functionality of Chocolaty, and that's now tied to a 1.0 release. The other one here, though, is, and this is where it starts to get interesting. So if you've been following along with Chocolaty and you've been looking at the release notes and you've been looking at the documentation and you've been looking at the help documentation that is output when you're executing Chocolaty commands, none of this should be a surprise, but there's always someone who's not going to have seen it. But there are certain commands in Chocolaty that have been marked as deprecated for a while now. But now that we've got to a 1.0 release, we've decided it's time to cut those commands loose, and we're no longer going to have them in the product. So the first one is the Choco update command, and the second one is the Choco version command. Now, previously, originally, I should say, in Chocolaty, there was a Chocolaty update command where it would be Choco update Winderstat, where you're actually installing, that would perform the update or the upgrade operation of the package that you've named. In order of being more in line with other package managers, and also to provide a mechanism to do an actual update operation on Chocolaty itself at some point in the future, the update command was deprecated in favor of the upgrade command. So if you've been using Choco upgrade, you don't need to worry about this. If in your scripts you have a Choco update, it's not going to work anymore. So the recommendation there would be to switch to the Choco upgrade command. The other command that has been deprecated is the Choco version command. Now, previously, you could use Choco version to figure out whether there is an available upstream, a new package version available upstream for any given package. That functionality was moved into the Choco outdated command. And for a long time now, the Choco version command has expressed that in the help output. So again, if you've been seeing the help output, none of this should be a surprise. So those two commands have now gone in both Chocolaty extension and in Chocolaty CLI. So those two commands are not there anymore. Okay, I'll come back to that in a little bit because that'll be in the release notes for Chocolaty as well. And then the third breaking change here is remove all usages of including aliases of the deprecated Chocolaty helper functions. So what we're referring to here is, in addition to some of the Chocolaty commands being removed in this 1.0 release, we've also removed some of the underlying Chocolaty PowerShell helper functions. So it's the ones that are listed here. So the write file update log, the write Chocolaty success, the write Chocolaty failure, and the install Chocolaty desktop link. So again, if you've been following along with the output of those commands or commandlets when you've been exercising them, they have been marked as deprecated for a while now. So you should have been getting warnings when they've been being used. And with this 1.0 release where we want to get to that baseline, we have removed them. Now there is a scope of work outside of kind of core Chocolaty functionality going into the Chocolaty community repository, where we will provide, or the intention is to provide, essentially a very small shims for these packages, or no, very small shims for these commandlets, so that any packages, older packages that still reference them, will still work. But that work hasn't quite made it into the time slot of the 1.0 release, but it will. I expect it to be out. I expect that extension to be available this week, and we'll obviously announce that somewhere so that folks are aware of it. So again, there is a breaking change in the sense that any package that is using one of those PowerShell commandlets, those package installations will be broken because they're using those functions. But those functions have been marked as deprecated. I'm going to say years, Paul. They've been a long time. So we're hoping that the majority of packages have had the opportunity to stop using those PowerShell commandlets. The other one here, this was an improvement, not a breaking change. What we noticed in the last release of Chocolatey and Chocolatey license extension was that even though we removed a feature, which again was a breaking change in the last release, even though we removed a feature, it was still possible to set it. So what I mean by that is if I go up here and do Choco feature enable, I forget the name of the feature now, Paul, though. But if I do name equals Bob, right? If I try to enable a feature called Bob, that won't be enabled because there is no feature called Bob. But the feature that we removed, which was allow script code something, I completely forget what the name of it was. But even though that feature was removed from Chocolatey CLI, you could still set the feature. You could still enable and disable the feature. So what we decided was that that didn't provide clarity around what was actually happening when you run the Choco feature command. So what we've now done in this release is we've made it clear that if you attempt to set a feature that is no longer supported in the current version of Chocolatey that's being executed, it will throw an exception saying that that feature is no longer supported within this version of Chocolatey. So if you run into that, that's exactly what it's about. Okay, so that's all I had for that one. So then we get on to Chocolatey itself. So this is where it all started, but I've gone in this direction to end on this one because it's the biggest, the lion's share of the work that's been done. And I wanted to talk through some of those. So start with the breaking changes again. So what we spoke about within the Chocolatey license extension was that those two commands have been removed. So we've shown that, or no, I didn't show that actually. So if I come up here and I try to do Choco update, the one that I always use for demo purposes, if I try and do Choco update windorstat, it's going to tell me now that it could not find a command register that meets update. Simply put, it's not there. In the same way, if I try and do Choco version windorstat, then that's also going to come up and say it's no longer there. Can't find a command register that meets version. So those two commands have gone. Now, on top of that, there were some shortcuts or shims for at least the Choco version command. So previously, I would have been able to do cver windorstat, and that would have executed the Choco version command under the hood. Now that shim has been removed from Chocolatey as well. Now the reason I bring that up is because there are a number of shims that still exist in Chocolatey. So for example, if I were to do clist -local only, that will execute the Choco list local only command. So clist being short for Choco list. Now what we have done though, if we go over to the docs pages here and we go over to Chocolatey and we look at commands, and let's just pick the first one, then what we're doing in the next version, the next major version of Chocolatey, we will be removing all of the shortcuts. So the ones that you might be used to, cinst, cpush, cuninst, and cup for Choco upgrade, all of those shims are being removed. They've been marked as deprecated in this 1.0 release, and we will be removing them in the 2.0 release. There are reasons for doing this. There's lots of them, but what we prefer people do is we prefer them to use the ubiquitous Choco command. That's the entry point for Chocolatey, not the shims that we've got. But more specifically, if the other shim that we've removed in this release is the Cpac Shim. Now, Cpac being short for Chocopac, it actually interfered with other applications installed on the machine. If, for example, you had CMake installed, which has the another Cpac executable, there was actually, because of where the Chocolaty bin folder lived within the path environment variable, CMake would actually be broken when Chocolaty was installed on the same machine, because the Cpac alias, our Cpac alias, was found before CMake's Cpac alias. So with that in mind, and to play and an attempt to play better with other applications that are installed on the machine, we've decided to remove all of the shims for Chocolaty, leaving only Choco and then the command name. So the recommendation here is, if you are using these shims in your scripts, in your automated tasks, etc., you are going to need to remove or switch over before the 2.0 release for those ones there. Again, documentation is going to have lots of information about that. You're going to see that everywhere on the doc site. It is outputted into the help commands as well. So if you run help commands or you perform an operation, it will make it very clear that this is happening in the next 2.0 release. So that hopefully shouldn't come as a surprise to folks, because that is something that we've spoken about in various discussions previously. So I want to bring that one up. So really what I've spoken about there is the first two breaking changes there, or the third one as well. So that one was the removal of the Cpac command alias. So that one's gone. The remove the fallback to using old URL for Chocolaty Community Repository when pushing packages. This one, Paul touched on it a little bit in the timeline, but it's at some point the default push URL, if you're pushing a package to Chocolaty, the default push URL was chocolaty.org, and then it got switched over to be default into push.chocolaty.org, and in Chocolaty's code base there was some fallback for handling that in a graceful situation. But again, that was marked as deprecated. So what's happening now is, if you attempt to do a Choco push and you don't have an API key set up for the new default, which is push.chocolaty.org, then we're not going to fall back to look for an API key that is set against chocolaty.org in your setup. So the recommendation there is, if you are pushing packages to chocolaty.org, using the push.chocolaty.org URL, then make sure that you've got an API key set up for that URL, because there's no longer going to be a fallback. I think it outputs what's happening. So in the command line output, you'll be able to see what's happening to know what needs to be changed. Another breaking change here was the removal of the -t argument for the push command. So in previous versions of Chocolaty, there was a -t argument which was used as a timeout variable or a timeout parameter for how long the operation is allowed to take before it will be ended. That really got replaced by an overall execution timeout that you can set on pretty much every single Chocolaty command. So the -t argument was superfluous. Basically, it wasn't needed. So that's been removed as well. But again, it's a change to the API, so it's marked as a breaking change. And then this one, ensure that Chocolaty that one there is ensure that Chocolaty correctly handles remove features when running the Choco feature command. That's the exact same thing that we spoke about in the Chocolaty license extension, but it had to be implemented in both places to correctly support open source features and license features and make sure that they all work together. So that's what that one was. In terms of improvements that's been added, we've updated to a new version of ShimGen. So anyone who has been using Chocolaty is likely to be aware of the shim generator that we use. It's a little utility function that creates those shims when a package is installed that maybe just has an exe, or where we don't want to add an entry into the operating system's path variable. We can add a shim into an already created entry in the path environment variable just to make things work the way they expect it to. So there's a couple of changes went into ShimGen itself, and then we pulled in the new version of ShimGen into this release. So ShimGen got bumped to 1.00, just to be in line with everything else. So there's no changes to functionality there, other than the shims that will be generated now. So if I go into see program data, I'll see if I've got one of the old ones. If I go into the bin folder here, then this shim here, which you can see here, if I not rename, if I you can see that it's got the old Chocolatey logo that kind of Paul alluded to in his slides earlier. That's the old Chocolatey logo, and that's the shim that would have been generated. So we've replaced that with a newer and hopefully better icon, where we've got the Chocolatey logo with a clear shim indicator across it as well. So there's some small changes in the ShimGen that then flow through into Chocolatey itself. A couple of things. I know I'm coming up on time here, so just to rattle through these last ones. Installation of Chocolatey should add a more descriptive comment when adding Chocolatey tab completion. That was really just a document. It's a documentation thing, but it's also an improvement to end user usage of Chocolatey. But the way that when adding information into your Chocolatey, not into your Chocolatey, sorry, when Chocolatey adds itself into your Windows PowerShell profile, it didn't make it immediately clear what that entry in the profile was actually doing. So we had some feedback from some community folks where they removed that entry from the profile because they didn't know what it was. So we've added a much more descriptive comment block that gets added into the PowerShell profile when we add it in, just to make it crystal clear what that is, what it's doing, and why it's there, and why you want to leave it there. And it's all to do with how tab completion works at the command line. Right through the documentation changes, a lot of these are to do with what we're kind of already spoken about, but we've added documentation everywhere that we can think of to make it clear about the upcoming deprecations and removals of certain pieces of functionality in that 2.0 release. So we've updated deprecation notices for the push command. That one there is important because as it stands, there's going to be some changes to the way that the Choco push command works, where currently we don't have the concept of a default source that you can configure, but we do have the concept of a default source. So what we're changing to is making it much more explicit about the end user opting into, well, this is my default source, rather than the one that's hard-coded into Chocolatey itself. So there'll be some changes in and around that area, and there's documentation supporting that. All the shims that we've spoken about, cinst, clist, cpush, etc., we've updated everywhere that we can think of to mark those as deprecated ahead of the next release. Same way, there's another commandlet within Chocolatey itself. It's the get bin root helper, which is documented all over the website. It's a poorly named commandlet. The new one, which is get tools location, is much more descriptive about what it's actually getting for you, other than bin root. So, but that would have been in this release, but it was coupled into a few other places. We opted to not do it in this release, and we'll do it in the 2.0 release. Add deprecation notice for all the things that are changing in V2. So again, wherever we can, we've updated the documentation to show that. There was some feedback from the community that it wasn't crystal clear about how the intersection between Chocolatey and ShimGen works, because one is a licensed product that's been granted a usage within Chocolatey, and then if you fork Chocolatey and you try and create your own application based off of it, can you or can you not use ShimGen? So the licensing has been updated to hopefully make that crystal clear between those two products. Document the fact that the source switch doesn't do anything when running Chocolist local only. That was an omission on our part. So if you do run the command Chocolist local only, there's no need and there's no requirement to do Chocolist local only -- source Chocolatey, because at that point the -- source part of that command is simply ignored, because you've also said it needs to be a local only command. So we added some documentation there to hopefully make that clearer about what's going on there. And the last one, show warning that is shown regarding using a trial license of Chocolatey. That was an update again to the documentation, and also changes to how our infrastructure works. Previously, if you were on a trial version of Chocolatey, it was necessary for you to download the licensed nutkegs, the packages, from the email to then put them somewhere. all of that's changed in terms of our infrastructure. So you don't need to do that work anymore. If you're on a trial license and you have the trial license installed, you can just grab the packages from the license feed, as you can do as if you are a paying customer. So that documentation just in the help output was updated to reflect that new case. And that's it. So I'm gonna stop talking. So if there's any questions, we can either field them now or later, but I know that we've got stuff to move on to next. So I'll stop my share.
I just wanted to say, Gary, that the feature you were talking about was scripts check last exit code. That was the feature that was removed.
That was the one. So if you attempt to set that now with 1.0, you won't be able to, but in the previous version, you would have been able to, but it still wouldn't have had any effect. So thank you for that.
So I linked to the feature, the GitHub issue in the chat. And the other one was Chocolatey aliases, as someone suggested, that we can always just alias it in our shell. So you can add the PowerShell alias for that, for the ones that have been removed. So you're not actually removing anything in that sense. So you can still get the same aliases there. So what I want to do at this stage is I want to bring in some of the Chocolatey team, and some people on holiday this week. And so we've not got the entire team here, but I'm going to admit everybody just now. Everybody will appear. Then we're just going to go around everybody and just kind of everybody can introduce themselves and just say a little bit about themselves for everybody here who's not met a lot of the back end Chocolatey team. You know, me and Gary front the Twitch streams, and we've got other team members coming in and out of the Twitch streams. And you've seen webinars perhaps with Stevie and Ryan, etc. as well. But you've not really seen all of us together, so it would be good to just go round everybody and just everybody to introduce themselves. So I mean, I introduced myself at the beginning, but I'll just introduce myself now so we've got it all together. So my name is Paul Broadwith. I'm a technical engineering manager here at Chocolatey Software. Gary, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah, I'm Gary Park. I am a senior software engineer here at Chocolatey.
Stephanie?
Hi guys, I'm Stephanie and I am the front-end software engineer here.
And Stephanie, as I mentioned earlier on, did all these awesome images. She also redesigned the website. Everything you see on the website today is courtesy of Stephanie and her talents there. So yeah, we'd actually be completely lost without Stephanie. And everybody, of course, everybody, but image-wise, just Stephanie. Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Sheldon. I'm HR administrator.
Jessica is our newest team member and very welcome as well. Corey, you're next.
I'm Corey Knox. I'm a junior software engineer.
You'll see Corey actually next week on the 30th of March. Stevie and Corey will be doing the Intune webinar. So if you haven't signed up for that, I don't know if someone can pop maybe the link into the chat there or point people to where they can register for that. But that our Intune integration is awesome. And it's a huge feature we added to Chocolatey last year. So Stevie, as I said, Stevie and Corey are going to go over that integration with us on the 30th. Ryan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Richter, support engineer here.
So if you send any support tickets in, they'll either hit Ryan or they'll hit Stevie, and you'll get a response from one or both of them. Rob, I'm going to skip over you. You're next to the camera. I'm going to come to you last. Brandy.
Hi, I'm Brandy. I'm HR/finance department.
Thanks, Brandy. Stevie.
Yep, I'm Stephen Vattinger, support manager here at Chocolatey.
Awesome, thanks, Stevie. And last but no means least, I did hold you to the end, Rob. But Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rob, and this is making my teeth black with this background, so it's awesome. I created Chocolatey a long time ago, and now they don't let me touch it, so put me in the corner. Yeah.
I was going to say that's not strictly true, but we'll skip over. I see the image that we mentioned, Chocolaty Fest, and the timeline of Chocolatey, and the image you've got in your background, Rob, is you and Manfred, one of our community members, who contributes heavily to Boxstarter at Chocolatey Fest in 2018, where you were dressed up. That was a surprise. So that's the Chocolatey team. As I said, you only see a small selection of us on the streams, on webinars, etc. But there is a team behind Chocolatey. There is a lot of people behind the people that you see on camera in these webinars and streams. I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody in Chocolatey for where we've come in those 11 years. And I also want to say an even bigger thank you to our community and to our customers, because without you guys, we wouldn't be here at all. A lot of the features that we've added have been driven by community and been driven by customer requirements. And this is how we develop Chocolatey. We make sure that it satisfies those needs and gives everybody the simple that they need in their IT lives. So we've come to the end of the stream today. I want to say thank you again to you for watching us today. You know, we've got another webinar coming up, as I said, with Stevie and with Corey next week. We've also got another stream happening on the 5th of April with Stephanie, myself, and Gary as well, and potentially another member of the team who's not here today. And going forward, these streams will maybe change a little bit. We're hoping to get the community more involved with some of these streams, and we'll talk about more of that later on, but things are going to change. But again, thank you to everybody, and we will all catch up with you, webinar streams in the future. Bye.